Let's tackle some philosophical questions today. Is the right-wing obsession with the fertility of teenage girls accurate or a smokescreen to justify creepy old men lusting after children? And does RFK Jr. really believe that as a 71-year-old man, he is more virile and fertile than a teenage boy?
When my uncle was president, the fertility rate in this country was 3.5%. Today, it is 1.6%. The replacement rate, in other words, the amount of fertility that you need in order to keep your population even, is 2.1%. We are below replacement right now. That is a national security threat to our country. And we know why this is happening. And President Trump is addressing the root causes through his MAHA agenda of reducing endocrine disruptors, the exposure to chemicals that decrease fertility. Today, the average teenager in this country has 50% of the sperm count, 50% of the testosterone as a 65-year-old man. Our girls are hitting puberty 6 years earlier. And that's bad, but also our parents aren't having children.
Hello, and welcome to Power Culture Coco, home of the Coco. I have ideas, and most of those ideas are about dismantling patriarchal myths to heal our wounds of dehumanization and obedience to irrational authority. And is there a more irrational authority than RFK Jr. as the Secretary of Health and Human Services? That man is half roids, half brainworms, and 100% a freaking creep. In that clip, he is speaking straight patriarchal nonsense, not scientific fact. Patriarchy has always been about serving the sexual and status desires of men, but specifically the oldest men who have hoarded enough wealth and power to sexually dominate women and keep young men locked out. And that's the basis of his creepy tangent about girls hitting puberty 6 years earlier and low testosterone and sperm count in teenage boys. Like, his patriarchal delusions that his reproductive value has only and will only ever continue to increase. And this entitles him to sexually access teenage girls. A belief which places him in direct competition with literal boys and young men, right? As patriarchy always does. First off, there is zero scientific evidence that teenage boys' sperm counts are half of a 65-year-old man's. Like, utter nonsense. General sperm decline across generations is probably real. There are some conflicting studies about it, but chemicals and pesticides are probably causing, between generations, lower and lower sperm counts. But it is not anything to be hysterical about. It's just another reason why we should actually, combat climate change and stop poisoning the earth, right? Just one of the reasons. That being said, there's really no data available about the sperm counts of minors. And that makes sense. Think about it. If you as a parent brought your minor son to the doctor and he was like, hey, I just want to collect a sample for research, like, what would you say? You'd probably be like, ew, you freak, get away from my child, right? So there's a reason there's not a ton of data on it. RFK is making those statistics up because he is fixated on controlling young girls' sexuality, which is patriarchy in a nutshell, right? And we see this vibe in polygamous cults, right? Where men have multiple wives, but women are only allowed one husband. And that setup is unmitigated patriarchy. What you'll see happen is the older men will seek to banish, sabotage, or harm boys and young men to decrease their sexual competition. Mormon cult leader Jeff Warren followed this script, and he's currently serving out a life sentence for essaying children, so that's good. But during his heyday, he would drum up whatever false violations to their community doctrine to justify exiling teenage boys, like literal boys, from their community. And here's the math on it. There are only so many girls born into a polygamous cult, and grown women don't typically choose to apply, right? So that math means that literal boys, children, are adult men's greatest competition. Because obviously teenage girls would prefer to be with teenage boys or young men, not ragged-ass, dirty old men. Right? And it's not just for cults. There are only ever so many teenage girls at a given time. And teenage girls are easier to impress and manipulate than adult women are. So gross old patriarchal men like RFK like to claim that they are all about fertility, but actually they prize the low effort, high reward nature of partnering with children, plus the status. No amount of power or money can buy the status of being with a youthful and beautiful girl in patriarchy's eyes. Like, that is the ultimate status prize for gross old men. So RFK is trying to stoke public panic about birth rates, masculinity, all to justify the right's obsession with the fertility of little girls, because their ultimate goal is normalizing child marriage and mandatory marriage for girls and women. Republicans have repeatedly blocked legislation to ban child marriage. So in America, we have no federal law against child marriage. And in fact, only 13 states, plus the District of Columbia, have actually banned child marriage without exception, which sadly is a lot of progress because just in 2017, child marriage was legal in all 50 states. If you got a parent or a judge to sign off, you could have a 14-year-old married to a 50-year-old. My heart breaks for Courtney Stodden. Justice for Courtney Stodden. Banning abortion was just the start of restoring male private for-profit ownership of women and girls. It really was. Project 2025 plans to ban birth control and no-fault divorce laws next. The Trump administration is trying to dismantle the Women's Bureau within the Department of Labor, which is tasked with advancing the interests of working women. So that trying to dismantle the Women's Bureau is an overt effort to push women out of the workforce by erasing us in the data and erasing all support for working women, which, like, there already wasn't a lot. In their most ideal world, all teenage girls would be forced to marry. Once a girl menstruates, 11, 12, 13, right? Then they want her to be married off to an adult man. They keep saying, oh, it's because teenage girls are so fertile and we need babies. We need babies. So teenage girls need to be having as many babies as possible. Otherwise, the declining birth rate will end us all. It's a national security threat. Literally, all of that is bullshit. Declining birth rates just mean that we need to tax billionaires out of existence to make the necessary social investments now. You only ever need an ever-expanding population if you are mortgaging future generations to avoid paying what you owe now. That's the truth of it. Declining birth rate hysteria is about scapegoating women for our failures to make social investments because we prioritize corporate and billionaire welfare instead. And I did a separate deep dive on that if you're interested. Straight up, none of this is about fertility. If you were genuinely interested in positive pregnancy outcomes, you don't look to teenage girls. So here's the deal. Women's hips continue to widen past puberty, right? Typically through our early 20s. And wide hips are very important. You need your hips to be as wide as they will be so that your pelvis will be as wide as it can be for the best possible birth outcomes. Human beings evolved big old domes, right? Even infants, we got big old brains, right? So pushing that out of a narrow pelvis is very dangerous. It's why birth is like life-threatening and requires assistance, right? A ton of mammals give birth on their own. They don't need any help, but humans do require assistance because of this truth. Also, bats help each other, but that seems to be like a social good where they're like, I'm with you, buddy. I love bats. Plus, teenage bodies are not done developing. They are at much higher risk for all sorts of complications and actually perishing during birth compared to women in their mid-20s and beyond. If you were genuinely concerned about positive pregnancy outcomes, you would not want women having kids until their mid-20s or later. And that is not even to speak of the emotional and cognitive aspects. Teens are children. They should not be raising children. The frontal lobe doesn't finish developing until we're around 25 or so. And that's where executive functioning, decision-making, and impulse control all live. The necessary neurological infrastructure for making healthy and balanced adult decisions, which is something you want in a mother, right? If it's about the kids, if it's about fertility. And also, the idea that women's eggs go bad is a patriarchal myth. It is absolute bullshit. It's actually sperm that declines in quality with age, right? They get more genetic mutations and they can get misshapen and slow. So older men's fertility and quality drops significantly compared to younger men's. And quality of sperm is critical. When a woman or pregnancy capable person is able to get pregnant but not stay pregnant, like they have consistent miscarriages, that's typically because of low quality sperm, not her body or their body. Eggs, on the other hand, much more resilient. So new research from the American Medical Journal found that, quote, human egg cells remain genetically stable as women age, resisting the accumulation of mutations in their mitochondrial DNA. The findings suggest that the oxytypes possess unique protective mechanisms that preserve mitochondrial integrity, helping maintain reproductive potential even later into life. I don't think I said that word right, but you can look it up in a science dictionary if you want to know more about it. So, unlike sperm, eggs don't decline in genetic quality over time. The fertility obsession with teens is just about validating gross old men that is natural, that they lust and leer at children. They can't help it. It's biological. It's not a choice they are making. And I want to be clear when people make historical arguments of, no, it's always the way it's been. Humans have always known that child marriage is shitty. Always. A major subtext of Romeo and Juliet is that child marriage is the root of tragedy. Trying to control a girl's future by forcing her into marriage leads to massive harm and destruction and is an abject failure of adult leadership. Like, that's the subtext of Romeo and Juliet. And let's cover one more motivation for this teen fertility obsession. Child marriage is about domesticating girls so they never develop into women. And this all mirrors a theory about the domestication of wolves into dogs, right? So the theory says that removing pups from their mother and pack was critical. That was the critical mechanism to domesticate them. Taking the puppy away to raise in isolation ensured that they never fully matured, so they remained in a permanent state of adolescence. Like dogs are permanent wolf teenagers, essentially. The theory argues that the full maturation required being taught by elder wolves and experiencing the stress of independent decision-making in the wild, right? They're pack animals, but every individual has to make decisions in the hunt, right? Responding to threats and whatnot. So without that socialization, especially being with older wolves, dogs remain teenagers their entire lives. And that made them dependent on humans and promoted their desire to please. And that is the same goal with child marriage, right? They want to isolate young girls, sequestered away from women who have experience and knowledge and genuine love and mentorship to offer young girls. And they want to remove all of that so that the girl never fully matures into a woman and just acts in permanent friendly servitude to the man that took her. And this is what RFK is hinting at and advocating for. Marrying girls off as soon as they menstruate because it's easier for men to train, dominate, and control them for their personal profit and pleasure. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Coco. Like and subscribe for weekly videos. I'm over on TikTok at Coco Has Ideas, Instagram Power Culture Coco, and drop a line in the comments. I always love to hear from yous. I'll see you next week.